If you were a kid who grew up in the 90s like me, on a lazy Sunday morning, you've probably just seen Ramayan, Rangoli or Shaktiman. It strikes 11 and there it is. All these celebrities coming together, what was for us and still is probably the biggest crossover event long before the Avengers. Over the years, Sur Mera Tumhara has attained a near anthem status for national integration. Just scroll down the comment section on YouTube and you'll see how people fondly recall what is essentially a beautiful example of state-sponsored, well-designed propaganda. Now don't get me wrong for calling this bit of nostalgia out for what it is. It employs some of the defining techniques of a propaganda piece. Bandwagon, encouraging people to act a certain way because other people are doing so. Testimonial, where a famous or authoritative person recommends an idea. Repetition, repeating a certain slogan multiple times so that the audience remembers it. Emotional words, using words that bring out positive emotions and feelings in people without the need to include facts. Transfer, projecting positive qualities of a person to make something more acceptable. Stereotyping. This technique attempts to arouse prejudices in an audience using stereotyped racial features. Euphoria. Using an appealing patriotic event to boost morale. And to top it all, it ends with literal flag waving. But the most important of all these traits is that it really doesn't feel like propaganda. Propaganda is a much maligned and often misunderstood word. The layman uses it to mean something inferior or even despicable. The word propaganda always has a bitter aftertaste. Thus spoke Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Nazi Germany. When we hear the word propaganda, we often think of the vivid, infamous iconography such as that from German or Russian propaganda of the last century. And it is not without reason. The Nazi regime micromanaged every aspect of public perception and standardized the Nazi agenda, successfully implementing one of the most effective brands ever devised. In what we would today refer to as a brand manual, Organization Book of National Socialist German Workers' Party maintained and enforced the overall look and style of the brand. They used symbols such as eagles, swastikas, flags, and even had a custom typeface called Fracto Black Letter to add visual drama to their messaging. The SS Army held highly orchestrated marches specifically during the night time to heighten the effect it had on people, which lasted as long as 5 hours. What Leni Riefenstahl did with Triumph of the Will was she essentially transformed propaganda into art.
34, wo ich den Triumph des Willens aufnahm, statisch. Es gab hier also nur Aufnahmen, unbewegte, keine Fahraufnahmen. Und ich überlegte mir, das Wichtigste ist, die Aufnahmen bewegt zu machen, dann sind sie interessanter.
Propaganda was so important to the Nazi regime that Hitler dedicated 2 entire chapters from his book Mein Kampf to the possibilities and importance of it. Governments across the world have used propaganda with surgical precision to control mass population, and the most effective of these pieces have shown a mastery of the craft.
Dieser Redenschiene, eine Rundschiene lege, dann ist die Rede interessanter, als wenn ich sie von einem Standpunkt aufnehme.
Propaganda inherently is not insidious, deceptive, or even manipulative, while it has been without doubt used in the past for exactly those purposes. In the hands of the right people, it can be used to make something as effective as Sur Mera Tumhara. Sur is that rare example of propaganda for good, that had a positive impact on the masses. It took something as political as national integration and turned it into a beautiful piece of communication that brings people together through something as universal as music. But Sur Mera Tumhara isn't the only work of propaganda that India has produced. Post-independence, the Indian government understood the importance of mass media in projecting the spectacle of nation building to the citizens of our young democracy. Jawaharlal Nehru set up the Films Division in 1948 just months after India attained freedom. In a lot of ways, the Films Division was a carryover of its colonial predecessor, Information Films of India, in both its spirit and form. These films were often characterized by a voice of God commentary that felt the need to spell out what was to be thought by the audience.
Our fears were short-lived. Our new life is a full and contented one. We now have many amenities.
The propagandic nature of these films glorified the Nehruvian school of rapid industrialization while failing to offer an alternative Gandhian view of agricultural development to the public. Imposing a mandatory showing of these films before the main feature in theatres meant that there was a ready audience to show these films to. A viewer who went to the films once a week would have been exposed to 26 such films in a year. The bureaucratic machinery churned out films one after the other on topics that included literacy, tolerance, hygiene, development, among many other things. These films often compromised on quality and creativity, but then came this. This film shocked the average cinema goer when it was first released and became a flag bearer for the unexplored capabilities of cinema as a medium. The films division even received a bill for the furniture destroyed during the screening of this film. Explorer came out during the 60s, what critics call the most exciting phase of the films division. Under the leadership of Jahangir Bhavanagari, the bureaucratic production pipeline was revamped and filmmakers were encouraged to take ownership of their films and stamp it with their own personalities. Peter Sutoris, in his book Visions of Development, traces the history of films division and calls this new brand of filmmakers the transient outliers. Armed with this newfound freedom to have their voices heard, these filmmakers didn't shy away from shaking the hornet's nest. The golden age of the films division saw an increase in the rebellious voices within the organization, who, instead of becoming tools of propaganda, pushed both the form and content of the films through their ingenuity. An Indian Day, a film by S. Sukhdev, explored the rift between modernity and traditions while taking a jab at both old and new ways using juxtaposition and visual irony to great effect. The films division, in the hopes of cultivating a better sense of film appreciation in their audience, threw them at the deep end of the pool through their experimental films. While there were films that explored pertinent issues in the society such as Klaxplosion by Pramod Pati, which presented a highly abstract tongue-in-cheek representation of population control, and Apathy by Clement Baptista that critiqued the government bureaucracy mixing real-life footage and animation. There were also films like Abid, which was a surreal experimental collaboration exploring the relationship between the art and the artist. These films were essentially furthering the craft of filmmaking.
Possibly I talk like a preacher or a politician, but then I am entitled to my opinions, and as the Lord said unto Moses.
Then there were the interview films that cleverly gave the control of shaping opinions from the filmmakers to the subjects being interviewed, lending these films an air of legitimacy. The filmmakers managed to incorporate voices critical of the establishment, bringing in a much-needed sense of objectivity.
I don't have any love for the country. Really? And just I don't want to show up like other people that I got a love for the country. Whom shall I tell? Suppose I got a love. Whom shall I tell that I got a love? Shall I go on the streets and tell everybody, oh, I got a love for my country?
Report on Drought by Krishna Kapil and Prem Vaidya didn't shy away from painting a grim picture of Bihar famine of 66-67. The film didn't hesitate to critique the government and steered away from even remotely becoming a propaganda piece for them. The careful selection of shots that chose not to glorify the large dams and government irrigation schemes, and instead focused on the local communities that helped in rebuilding the society, was a testament to the crew's commitment to film realism. The Outliers were very aware of their role in building the young democracy. Their integrity and ingenuity with their craft in making these films was meant to develop a critical perspective in the viewers while acting as a mirror to the government. Now, for any propaganda machinery to succeed, its absolute control and expertise over the medium is important. The bureaucracy at Films Division realized that this kind of blanket freedom with the Outliers was hitting back at them. And like all good things that come to an end, eventually restrictions started coming into place, and the voices of rebellion started dwindling. The emergency again exposed how government institutions could be used as tools of propaganda by the state. The Prime Minister was a product of the emergency era Films Division, which was a blatant propaganda piece on Indira Gandhi.
As a representative of the people, is happiest when meeting the people face to face. She spends 3 months in a year on tour to make the people feel that the government at the center is not all that far from them. Now,
without the right intent, every medium has the capability of being misused. The success of Sur Mera Tumhara also led to a lot of copycat brands that cashed in on the positive association of the brand with patriotism. We still see its effect on popular culture to this day.
दरअसल ये लोग फर्ज निभाते हैं अपनी मिट्टी के लिए.
Marshall McLuhan in 1953 put it in this deceptively simple observation that the medium is the message.
The concern of the advertiser is to make an effect. Any painter, any poet, any musician sets a trap for your attention.
People tend to focus on the obvious, which is the content. In the process, there's a failure to understand the package that it comes in and how it wields the power to trap our attention. Propaganda today has expanded its scope and penetrated all mediums. We've all become armchair propagandists. Unlike the previous generations where it was only possible for governments to regulate and officiate propaganda, Internet has become the Wild West of information, with every message trying to vie for our ever-shortening attention spans. It doesn't harp on the usual utopian society string like the Nazis and Soviets. What it instead does is it creates noise and confusion. We are exposed to hundreds of such images each day, where everything is a propaganda of one sort or the other. We just don't call it propaganda anymore. We call them WhatsApp messages, movies, or even a YouTube video. It's easy to see how the command over the medium has become even more important today. Brands have graduated to using influencers to reach our social media feeds directly. Even political parties are using it for maximizing their outreach. A political party with a larger count of WhatsApp groups can easily swing an election in their favor. With decreasing attention spans, we have become more averse to critically examining the message. The outliers from the films division took the burden of informing the right things. They challenged the very way in which the medium could be molded, all to evolve the citizens of our then young democracy. Their understanding of the medium meant that they could put their thoughts across in unique and innovative ways, challenging the authority. But then can we put the onus of responsibility on the content creators alone?
What is desperately needed is a kind of understanding of the media which would permit us to program the whole environment. If you understand the nature of these forms, you can neutralize some of their adverse effects and foster some of their beneficent effects. This we have never reached this level of awareness.
The best kind of propaganda often never reveals itself as such. It thus becomes even more important for us to understand the medium before the message. Subscribe and stay tuned for more.